Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And this is Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Sarah's Chill, that amazing company that never stops making the lives of breastfeeding parents easier. And we will hear more from them later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page. If you ever need anything, see if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, you can scroll down and you can enter your email address and we will send these episodes straight to your inbox every week. And we would love it if you would check out the top link under this episode in the show notes, wherever you're listening from. You can also find our Patreon link over at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com because we have exciting things going on there all the time and original content that you won't find here and ad-free. And check it out. And we're hosting our ongoing giveaway always and forever for anyone who leaves reviews around the internet, whether they're written reviews or stars or whatever you can do in the app that you listen from. Send a screenshot to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com along with your email address, and we'll send you a goodie bag of stickers and thank you for nursing in public cards that you can spread around the world. And I think now Dianne has our review of the week.
Yeah, let me pull it up. Da-da-da. The drama. Okay. I can't tell you two how much I love your podcast. I'm a longtime listener, currently nursing baby number 2. My first nursed until he was 3 years and 2 months. When he was 2.5, nursing like a newborn, I finally implemented some boundaries thanks to your episode. That is what slowly started our weaning journey. I love how gentle the process was, even though it wasn't our intention. It's just what worked for us. 6 months after weaning, and we found out we were pregnant again. Things are going well with baby number 2. I've learned so much and become extremely passionate for breastfeeding that I've actually started a course to become a CLC. Someday I would love to pursue an IBCLC, but our infant is only 5 months now, so it's definitely not the time for that. And even though I've learned so much from your podcast and now through my class, I still have so many questions. I am so excited to continue learning and helping other mamas along the way. I recommend your podcast, especially the myths episodes, to all expecting moms I know who are interested in breastfeeding. I just feel like you can get so much information in those episodes that can greatly impact someone's journey. Plus, you two are a hoot in those ones, and those are the ones that are more likely to get them hooked. Thanks for all that you do. Very sweet.
Yes, the myth episodes are fun.
They are fun.
Well, today's episode is sort of like a myths episode.
Today's episode is sort of like a myths, except the myths episodes are ridiculous. They're like the ridiculous stuff that we hear.
But stuff that you hear.
Yeah, stuff that you hear, but still just like...
Yeah, usually off the wall stuff that you can't believe is out there.
I know. And today's episode is more like, this is stuff that's really out there that people are serious about.
Yeah.
That is just like not true at all. And that's why we were doing it, because it's like, okay, I'm sick of hearing this stuff. And I do if anybody knows, I work for an education company that does education for learning to becoming a lactation consultant. And we were doing a study group the other day and we were talking about marketing, which was kind of, the whole WHO code. We were talking about the WHO code and the marketing of breast milk substitutes and how much that impacts breastfeeding. And that's why I was kind of thinking about this episode, because so much marketing.
Yes. And it's the marketing that really gives us our perspective on breastfeeding, and infant feeding in general is really all of the beliefs and even the cultural norms that we have are really rooted in this marketing.
Mm-hmm. It is. And so the first one I have is that breastfeeding and formula feeding are the same thing. That is out there. People are saying that. And it is so not true. It is not true that breastfeeding and formula feeding are the same thing, or that there's not much difference between the two.
Right.
And I remember probably one of the first times I ever heard that, somebody told me that, and this was years ago, somebody told me that her doctor told her that because of all the chemicals in the world and in the air that get into your breast milk, it really doesn't matter if you breastfeed or formula feed because it's both this, it doesn't matter. There can't be anything further from the truth.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Of all of the crap that's in our world, you want the breast milk.
Yeah, exactly.
You want breast milk and all of its, protective factors and germ fighting factors and vital organ developing goodness. That's a scientific word. Goodness.
But that is, that one always kills me that people say, there's really not much difference between breast and formula feeding.
Well, that's what, just basically, there is a difference between formula and breast milk. There's also a difference in feeding from the breast and feeding from a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the basic feeding logistics are going to be different. So it's not the same. I had a friend a long time ago. Her son is an adult now, but at the time she said that she didn't want to breastfeed, and it made her uncomfortable, and she didn't want to do it. And she said but it doesn't matter because formula is just like breast milk nowadays anyway. And I'm not gonna. I don't need to argue with her. She wasn't comfortable breastfeeding. There's a lot of people who aren't comfortable breastfeeding for one reason or another, and they don't want to. And that's totally fine. We have formula for people who don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's great. And like, but the way that you make these decisions is having all of the information, and just people not having information and making decisions blindly is what really pisses me off.
Right.
Instead of telling people, she probably would, they may have been like, well, here's the difference. And she would have been like, she probably would have said, that's whatever. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want to do it. I'm going to formula feed. And that's whatever. That's what you get to do. You get to make a decision for yourself. But, an informed decision is we want people to be making.
Right. Make a decision that's correct.
Or the decision that's...
with the correct information.
With the correct information. That is right for you. Just having all of the information.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want for people.
Yeah. And if you're not getting that, you're just making a decision that's kind of off the cuff, like
you're
if you don't have all the information.
in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is it's unfortunate. And her, you're right. Her decision probably would have been the same regardless if she had all the information or not, because she had kind of already made up her mind.
Yeah.
But don't go spreading the story that breast milk and formula are kind of the same now because of the way they make formula, because it's not. They can't. Right. There's so much that they cannot duplicate.
Right.
From breast milk. And like you said, breastfeeding, the act of breastfeeding itself is very, very different than bottle feeding.
Right.
And the benefit that they get from that. There was one time, one of the cool benefits that I thought that I know of that happens when you're a bottle feeding is, like when babies have, sometimes their eyes aren't focusing and they kind of can go like one side to the next or whatever. They kind of their eyes cross sometimes because they're not focusing quite yet. And when I was working in the peds office, I was in there while one of the pediatricians was doing his little exam, and the parents asked about that, about the baby's eyes crossing. And I said, breastfeeding will actually help with that. And he's like, what? Thinking that I meant that the breast milk was going to help with that. And I said, well, the act of breastfeeding, because you're putting the baby on one side, you're switching sides and you're putting the baby on one side and the other side. And that's going to help, strengthen their eye muscles. And he was like, oh yeah. And I was like, I'm not saying squirt it in their eye and it's going to keep them from crossing their eyes.
It has so many health benefits, including non-eye crossing antibodies in there.
I know.
It's fantastic.
So crazy.
Yeah. And I think we talk about just, talking about bottle feeding and breastfeeding. The act of breastfeeding strengthens their jaw muscles and their facial muscles and helps form their palate and because bottle feeding is totally different and they're not doing that. And now, of course, we all know that if you're formula feeding, you don't grow up to be like a deformed monster. Of course, you're going to develop. We do know that it could possibly, if you're formula feeding, sometimes these babies have more frequent ear infections. And that's just, again, this is information that you can have so that you know what you're doing.
Right. So you can make a decision.
And there's a lot of things. Yes, there's a lot of things about breastfeeding that people don't want to have anything to do with. And they're like, I know that I'm going to have to do that. And I don't want to do it. And that's great. Again, that's another informed decision that you get to make with all of the information instead of just getting thrown into it. And I think that this is sort of nitpicky, but since we are an evidence-based podcast, I do think that we should bring it up, is that, when we talk about breastfeeding, a lot of times we do talk about the benefits of breastfeeding, but breastfeeding is the biological norm. This is what humans are evolved to do and developed to do, wired to do. So whatever all these benefits are that happen with breastfeeding are actually the biological norm of things that happen. And there are risks to formula feeding. We can go so far as to say that there actually aren't any benefits to breastfeeding. There are only risks to formula feeding. If we are saying breastfeeding is the norm, this is the baseline. So this is a line here of what's going to happen, or the developmental evolution, the things that happen with breastfeeding that we're talking about. That's the norm. That's the baseline. And then we have things when we're talking about the ear infections or the things that come with breastfeeding. Babies have less ear infections. Actually, breastfeeding babies have the amount of ear infections that we would expect biologically for an infant. The risk with formula feeding is that there can be an increased amount of ear infection.
Yeah.
Am I making sense? I don't want to be one of those women that makes a lot of sense and then goes, am I making sense? Because I know what I'm talking about.
No, you're totally making sense. I totally get it. But that kind of brings me to the next one where it says breastfeeding does not increase IQ. And that has been circulating too, that people say, oh, it doesn't really make you smarter. But like you said just now, it's kind of the baseline, right?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. That one gets me in a place where I feel like, okay, well, if I formula feed, is my baby going to be dumb?
No, they're not going to be dumb.
That's not that's not true. My baby had formula. He's the smartest person in the house. The one that had formula is, I believe, the smartest person in this house. But yeah, these studies, people do studies and they do studies on, I guess, IQ points on, groups of formula fed babies and groups of breastfed babies, and formula fed babies had lower IQ. Now, I have not read these studies. I don't know if there's a group of peer-reviewed studies on this. I don't know. But
there is definitely research on it. Yeah. And there's also research on them doing studies about testing and kids that have been breastfed taking, in testing that have scored higher in average testing than kids that were not breastfed. So that also shows us too that there's a couple of IQ points difference there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It's very interesting. But we know that breast milk helps with brain development. There are components to your breast milk that help with brain development. So that is where that comes from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it only makes sense, right? It makes sense that when you're using something, or your baby is feeding on something that is developing their brain. And no, they're not going to be one of the pediatricians I used to work with used to say, well, I could have maybe been a brain surgeon if I had been breastfed, but I'm just a pediatrician.
No. That's really funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. Take what you want from this conversation, but that's funny. See, he wasn't breastfed, but so if you're formula fed, you'll be the funny one, though.
Yeah, exactly.
He's certainly got a sense of humor. That's really funny.
Yeah. But it is really interesting. It is some of the benefits. Like if you really look into the research about some of these benefits, the studies do exist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I definitely can feel how that would sit with somebody hearing that, because my sister was purely formula fed, and I feel like if I was just like, oh yeah, formula fed, you have your low IQ is lower because you, and obviously this isn't. We all know, and everybody knows it's not like an individual. Like everybody who is formula fed has a lower IQ than everybody who is breastfed. That's not what the research is telling us.
That's not the research is telling us.
But I can feel that sitting. I can feel like that particular one sitting a little weird.
Yeah,
people, that one hurts absolutely. A little.
Should we take a break?
Oh yeah, we should. All right, we'll be right back. Chill? Yes, Sarah's Chill. We love Sarah's Chill. They have so many cool things. And they really do. Their thing is really just trying to make your life easier with their cool products. And they were created by a mom for moms. They know the challenges that this journey can bring. That's why they're committed to creating solutions that help families overcome hurdles and reach their breastfeeding goals. Their Shield Maiden nipple guards help parents overcome obstacles with latching, soreness, and flat or inverted nipples. Each Shield Maiden is made of laboratory-tested food-grade silicone that is velvety skin textured on the side used by your nursing baby, and smooth on the mama side so it adheres well. But the best part is they change colors. The shields are vibrant at room temperature so you can easily find them when you need them, and clear at body temperature to give you a more natural experience. Revolutionary mom tech is the coolest. Whether it's a game-changing breast milk chiller, an epic freezer storage system, or color-changing nipple shields, this company has everything you need and want. Sarah's Chill is truly breastfeeding reimagined. You can head over to sarahschill.com, that's CERESCHILL.com, and check out their magic sizing kit to find your perfect nipple fit. Use the code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. That's sarahschill.com, BADASS for 15% off anything you buy there. The breast milk chiller, the nipple shields, the milk stash, everything they have. They have these custom breast milk chillers where you can get like your choice of an engraved image to choose from, and then you can get like a personalized thing on it engraved. Really very cool. Yeah. So check them out. And you can find all of our sponsors, again, over at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. And over there, you'll also find information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
Yes, I would love it. Next one. And this one always bothers me when I see it out there, because it's usually said by people trying to market formula, or I know that there are some bloggers out there that are strictly, about formula feeding, fed is best and stuff like that. And this one is breastfeeding does not have all the health benefits that people think it does. And that is, I'm always like, there's so much research. There's so much research and research coming out every day about the health benefits, not only for babies, but for the breastfeeding parent as well. That, the mother is going to get, so much health benefit from breastfeeding. And there's so much research behind that. And yet they still say, those studies are not good studies, or they're not, this isn't real and it's not as like people say it is. And they're just trying to say that, just trying to push their own agenda.
Yeah. You know what's funny? Because I see there's, I can't remember. I was watching like the live stream of some conference, some kind of breast milk conference or increasing breastfeeding rates conference. I can't even remember. This was a while ago. And I don't know why I had it or what I was looking at. But, there's conferences that go, or maybe you don't know, there's conferences that go on, scientists get together for their, World Health Organization, conference or the International Breastfeeding Alliance conference or there's like the people, scientists that do work on breast milk and they get together in different places around the world, like people that have conferences do. Like it's just a thing, a normal thing. And you listen to these people, they're talking about, research that's coming out about breastfeeding, risks of formula feeding, the research that comes out about, whatever, the health disparities between formula fed babies and, the communities that are targeted by formula marketing and I'm like, I can't believe there's all of these people, like the world's leading scientists are here talking about this. And we don't know any of the information that they're talking about. We are not exposed to it. Like formula, the $1 billion, $1 trillion formula companies, they have a stronghold on like the information that's given out here in this country. They're not, these conferences are not given airplay. We're not the people who have money here are the formula companies, and they're the ones who are controlling the information that we get. Like, it's wild to me that I'm like, wait a minute, but all these like people are saying this thing. How come we're not like, how come our pediatricians aren't telling us this? How come we don't know about this?
I know.
It's like we're not giving, we don't get the real information on breastfeeding.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's like something fishy's happening.
It really, and there's a lot of really cool benefit to breastfeeding that people don't know about. There's really, really cool benefits to breastfeeding.
Or another way to say it is there's a lot of things that are supposed to happen and supposed to develop with your baby when you're breastfeeding that don't happen if you're formula feeding. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know that we're in the middle of, what is it? World Breastfeeding Awareness Month. Breastfeeding Awareness Month. Thank you. And, we have the different weeks, where we're supposed to be bringing awareness to the different communities, like the Asian American Pacific Islander week, and then the Indigenous week, and then we have the Black Breastfeeding week. And I think that the Black Breastfeeding week, for example, this was started because Black communities are targeted by formula companies. And Black babies are like, I used to know the statistic right off the top of my head, and I don't know, but they're way more likely to die and have diseases and stuff because of the formula feeding and the lack of breastfeeding in that community. And so this community, who is now learning this and aware of this, this community, due to in slavery, when babies were taken away and they were forced to feed white babies, Black breastfeeding became very taboo in this community. They didn't want to do it anymore. They really wanted to separate themselves from it. But now they're seeing these health disparities and breastfeeding. There's lactation leaders in the community who are trying to push breastfeeding for the Black community to help the infant mortality rates. Mm-hmm. And like, this stuff is real. This is real. Like breastfeeding, like your body makes this breast milk in a specific way because your body knows how to keep your baby like healthy and alive. This is why this is This is why we are made to do this. And when you
Mhm.
formula feed, there are risks to it. We can see the risks happening, and this is just science.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Next one is breast milk has no benefit after a year. How many times we hear that?
Yeah, we hear that all the time.
All
Sometimes
the
it's 6
time.
months. It depends on who you ask, because sometimes it's 6 months.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's because, well, I'm not even going to guess as to why it's because, but sometimes I think that there is like the way it's written with AAP and the World Health Organization is they say, well, babies should be exclusively breastfed for 6 months. And
At least.
they should be, for at least 6 months. But then the other part of that is, and then they start complementary foods at 6 months, and then breastfeeding should continue until year 2, as long as it's mutually acceptable between parent and baby. But you hear that for 6 months.
Yes. And then, now your breast milk doesn't have enough fat or enough calories or enough iron or enough whatever. And so you have to switch to something else, usually some sort of fortified formula. Or if it's after a year, we know that we've learned recently that toddler formula is even a bigger market and it's a bigger market than the infant formula, right?
Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous.
That's wild. I mean, and that's marketing too. It's like, your baby's not getting enough, your toddler's not getting enough, nutrients that they need. And that's just not true.
So we know too, we did an episode a while back on the benefits of breastfeeding after a year. And I mean, your breast milk changes to accommodate, right? We know that to be true, that your breast milk changes to accommodate the infant. And even after a year, like it's more concentrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's got higher nutrients in it that babies need after a year. It's just incredible how it changes to accommodate that baby. And it's far from true that there's no benefit after a year.
Yeah. And we can also say that, as we always say, as breastfeeding is so much more than food. And that becomes even more true after a year, I think, because, they are starting to, it's like your baby falls down, breastfeed, your baby is upset, breastfeed. It's like the answer for everything.
Yeah.
Which is true in infancy too, but they are literally like feeding for their life at that time.
Yeah.
People who are breastfeeding until a year and then they want to stop, you don't have to get that toddler formula. You don't. Your baby your baby can eat food and have other things to drink. Your baby doesn't have to go from breast milk to formula unless they are under a year old. After a year, you're good. Your breast milk is still very beneficial, but you don't have to switch to that toddler formula if you're done. If you just feel like you're done after a year, then
they make it sound like that this is the next step, right? Like having the toddler formula is the next step,
well,
and that's what you should
called,
do.
like step 2 or
something like
some
that.
Some of it is called like I mean, these are marketing geniuses.
They are. And even the American Academy of Pediatrics says this is a farce. Don't do it.
Oh, wow. That's pretty bold for them.
Yeah. They're like, there's no benefit to toddler formula.
Yeah.
And there isn't.
No. It's just expensive for you. It's just expensive for you. And I can't imagine that anybody would be spending their money on toddler formula unless they were really worried that their baby wasn't getting enough nutrients. And that's just, it's not true. You don't need it. No. Even like Dianne said, the American Academy of Pediatrics says you don't need that.
No, you do not. And I know in other parts of the world, it is, they're very popular and they really are pushing them.
Yeah, probably
it's just
poor
not
countries.
Necessary.
This is what we do to poor countries.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. My last one is breastfeeding into toddlerhood isn't normal.
Whatever.
being that it is Breastfeeding Awareness Month, you see a lot of people out there that are more open about their breastfeeding relationships right now because it's Breastfeeding Awareness Month. And you see more comments about, oh, you're just doing that. That I saw it recently on somebody's Instagram. You're only doing that just for attention. If you are, what I love is you're breastfeeding a 3-year-old. Well, that's just because that's for you now, not for your baby.
Yeah.
Not for
Anybody
that
who
3-year-old.
says that has never breastfed.
And they've never tried to force a child to feed. Who is forced? Come on.
Oh
you
my God.
cannot force a toddler to nurse.
I know that I've told this story before, but it's been a while. But me and my friend Amanda, who you've helped her. You were her lactation consultant with her third baby. And so her and I took a trip to the East Coast. We went to the White House and we were going to do we were visiting another friend, but we were like, oh, it'd be really cool if we get because she was still nursing she didn't have her third child yet. She was still nursing her middle child. And I was still nursing Jack, but we all know Jack breastfed forever. So she's like, I don't know if he's going to, he might not, I don't know, so we go to the front of the White House. We thought it'd be really cool if we got a picture of her breastfeeding in front of the White House. And she's literally, I have just a series of pictures of her taking his head and trying to push it to her boob. And he's just just moving around, whatever. And and I'm like, this is just a perfect example of yeah, you cannot force them. How do you force them to latch onto your breast? And you've never had a toddler and tried to get them to do anything.
Right.
Or breastfed. And who does that for themselves? No, it's hard. Right. It's hard. We do it because we want to, and we want to, and we feel like it's beneficial. But nobody's saying it's easy.
No, with these terrible, hurtful comments, things like, well, then I guess you're going to tell your 7-year-old that they can't have a sleepover at their friend's house because you have to breastfeed them. And it's
okay. Whatever. I mean, I'll breastfed. If Jack would ever go on a sleepover, he breastfed until he was 6.5. And I would go over to my friend's house or go over to his friend's house, whatever. I would nurse him on the couch. This never happened. This is what I would do. I would nurse him on the couch before, and then I'd be like, okay, bye-bye. I'll see you in the morning. I'll come over and I'll nurse you when you wake up. That's what I would do. I mean, I don't know, right? Do 6 and 7-year-olds go on sleepovers? Maybe they do. I can't remember when I started going on sleepovers. My kids are they're not into that. But
yeah, I feel like that's young.
What I would do.
I feel like that's really young.
That's pretty young. Yeah. I feel like they don't want to be away from home like that young. No. But that's what I would do. And anyone who's friends with me would be like, okay.
I mean, what the hell is wrong with people?
I don't know.
That they can't just keep their comments to themselves.
Yeah,
they don't know.
Kids people are like, oh, you're going to breastfeed them in preschool? Yeah, I am. How about a baby? I mean, if you have an infant that goes to daycare, you feed them before they go to daycare, and then you feed them when they come home, and they have bottles while they're away. How's that different than a 5-year-old who's going to preschool? I'll nurse you before you go to school, nurse you when you get home. You have your food when you're there. What?
Right.
People think it's weird because you don't see it, but that's because you don't see it and you haven't seen it.
Because
it's actually not weird.
Exactly.
It's not weird. It's literally a thing that has always gone on with humans. The weaning early, that's what's weird. That is what is not biologically normal. To wean an infant. That's not normal. And if you nurse a child and you let them nurse into you let them self-wean, as they say, they'll go anywhere from 2 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear a lot. I mean, you hear these of cultures where, I mean, there are cultures where this happens and people don't have these comments because it's normal there.
It's normal. Right. And it should be. I wish it were normal here.
Yeah.
More people do it. I mean, we know it because people come to us and say, oh, I'm, still nursing my 3-year-old or, whatever. So we see it all the time, but people don't see it. And it's really, and then because they don't see it, then they're going to, raise judgment about why is this still happening? And I mean, I have friends that they're friends and colleagues that they're like 6 and 7-year-olds just weaned. And when they get to be that age, like the parents are like trying to talk them into weaning, you know, like because and the kid's like, no, not doing it. You know, it's like why I don't know why anybody thinks that we're doing it for us.
No,
like we're so selfish. The parent, like, oh, you're so selfish. You're the mother. You're still breastfeeding this baby that's so selfish.
And the wonderful thing about breastfeeding a child that's old is that you can talk to them. And you can say, like, I'm not, I don't really feel like it right now. I'm tired. We need to just go to sleep tonight. Or you can, like, okay, you can nurse for a minute, before we fall asleep. And then, I'm going to put my arm around you. That's what I did a lot. And they're like, okay, because they're not 6 months. They like get it.
Right.
I mean, they're not always happy about it. Like a 2 or 3 year old's not always going to be happy about it. But a 6-year-old, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
In perfectly stated English, because they have also been speaking for a long time, and people just think that's super weird. And I'm like, no, it's actually really cool.
Yeah. When they could talk to you when they have teeth. That's always my favorite one.
Oh my God.
You're going to keep breastfeeding them after they have teeth? It's like, what? They have to eat. Yeah. We're just going to stop feeding your kid because they have teeth?
Yeah.
Like, what sense does that make?
Yeah. They don't chew on your boob.
No.
That's not how they get the breast milk out. I mean, they might bite, but not
people that don't get it.
Yeah.
But they just want to put their opinion out there.
Yeah. 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 That's always the like, oh, if they're old enough to have a burger, then they're too old to breastfeed. It's like, just because you came up with a sarcastic comment that is kind of funny doesn't mean that's true.
Right.
It's like the whole thing, like just because it rhymes doesn't mean that it's like back
right.
France.
Pump and dump. Right.
Yeah,
just because it rhymes doesn't mean that's a thing. Yeah. Exactly. But that's it. Those are my 5 lies that I'm
There's so many more lies.
Yeah, there's lots of lies out there. But those are the biggest ones that I could come up with at the time.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.